Right, so good morning, everyone, and thanks to everyone who's joining us today for this very exciting event that we have. The Endangered Wildlife Trust is obviously celebrating Women's Month throughout the whole of August, as would the rest of South Africa hopefully be doing. And we're celebrating the role of female leadership in the environmental sector and the role of women in saving our environment and our planet for future. And we're very honored today to have with us the Honorable Minister Barbara Creecy, who is the Minister for the Department of Environmental Affairs, Forestry and Fishery. And so this morning we are very honored to have this opportunity to have an informal conversation with our Minister, focusing specifically around the role of women in environmental issues in our country and going forward. At this point, I'm going to ask for a quick round of introductions for our leading ladies that are on the panel. Minister, I'm going to start with yourself, and then I'll come back to me, and then I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Ndzalama, who's going to introduce herself and kick off with our first question. So, Minister, I don't know if you'd like to maybe give some background.
Thank you very much. My name is Barbara Creecy. I'm the Minister of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries. I was appointed to President Ramaphosa's cabinet approximately a year ago. I have been in government since 1994. So I'm a bit of a fossil. 25 years of that was in the Gauteng provincial government.
Wow, it's amazing when you think 94 is already 25 years ago. It's quite startling. The years do move on. So my name is Jolane Friedman. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Endangered Wildlife Trust, and I've had the honor to work in this organization that has a more than 50% participation with female colleagues. And I've worked in this organization for about 20 years myself. So I think we've all been with our respective organizations for a fair amount of time. Ndzalama Chauke is my colleague and one of our leading ladies in the EWT. I'm going to allow her to introduce herself and then kick off with our first question.
Thank you very much, Yolan, and good morning to Minister Creecy. My name is Ndzalama Chauke, and I work with the Wildlife and Energy Program, and I've been with the Endangered Wildlife Trust for 5 years now. So it has been a great journey, and I've enjoyed working with everyone and every woman that has been involved, and I've learned a lot from everyone. So, and I'm really, really, really honored to be doing this interview with everyone. I mean, it's Women's Month, and we really need to celebrate. So yeah, I wouldn't have it any other way. So I'm happy. Going to our first question, Minister. I mean, with your line of work, what unique strengths and characteristics do you believe as women have that can add value to being a person of influence in the environmental sector?
Thank you very much, Ndzalama. And I just want to suggest we all mute when we're not speaking, because there's quite a bad echo on the line, including you, Ms. Chauke.
Okay.
Wonderful. I think that makes the sound much better. Look, I think that what I can say from my own experience is that women, I suppose, because of our societal position, are the carers and the caregivers. And I think what that does is that it makes us, first of all, very conscious of the fact that society has winners and losers, and society has vulnerable people within it. And I think that what we all understand is that environmental degradation doesn't affect everybody equally. Those who are most vulnerable in our society, whether it's the young, the old, those who are living in conditions of poverty, are more likely to experience the consequences of environmental degradation. And I think my own life experience has been that since I've been a mother, I have become more conscious about issues pertaining to the future, because I'm concerned about my own children's lives and hopefully one day my grandchildren's lives. And so I have started to think about what kind of world will they live in, and how will that world treat them. And I think that many women are in that position where they think about the future of their children and of their grandchildren. So I suppose that once you start to think about these two things, the fact that life doesn't treat everybody equally, and the fact that there are a lot of challenges that lie ahead in our future, you have to then start to think about environmental questions. And perhaps that's why we find that women tend to be more empathetic to these issues, and perhaps that empathy leads them to choose careers that would be in the caring professions, but also perhaps in future orientated professions.
So, Minister, based on that, I mean, I know in South Africa, there's obviously a very strong political reason for us having and celebrating Women's Day. But generally speaking, in today's fairly or relatively emancipated society, do you still see a role for a Women's Month? And I ask this because amongst many of my friends and colleagues, it's quite controversial. Some women really like having a month where the role of women is celebrated, and other women seem to find that it might still be a fairly patronizing concept, that we need to have 1 month of the year where we, really celebrate women's rights, and they feel that it might be a step back for equality. So the political history behind the day aside, do you still see a role and a value of having a month of the year where we celebrate the role of women in today's society?
Well, Yolan, I'm always of the view that you can never start any conversation in our country by saying, let's forget about our history. Because our history determines who we are today. It determines our life chances. It determines our children's life chances. So we are still very overdetermined by that history. And we know that in our country, women still suffer the triple burden. So women are still oppressed on the basis of gender. Women are still oppressed on the basis of their race, and women are still oppressed and exploited on the basis of their class position. And until we see a situation in our society where whether you were born in a township or whether you were born in a suburb makes absolutely no difference to your educational opportunities, your health opportunities, your living opportunities, your environmental opportunities, we can never say that our history doesn't matter. Obviously, every day is Women's Day, because women represent over 50% of our population. And the fact that we set aside a particular month of the year to emphasize issues pertaining to women doesn't mean that every day is not Women's Day. So I would say that we need to say this is a month when there can be a special focus on these issues, but it doesn't mean that the rest of the year we can happily forget about them and come back to them next August.
Yeah, I like that. And I think to younger girls today, I think your point about not forgetting the road that's been walked by previous generations of women is critical, and then reminding them that they still have a long road ahead for us to walk on behalf of on their shoulders going forward. Ndzalama?
I mean, Minister, with all that being said, what do you think are the advantages and benefits do you believe as South African women have, and that we can all as women be proud of?
Well, I think we're coming from the previous conversation, which is a conversation about our history. And while I think our generation of women experience, and particularly, in fact, the younger generation of women, have certain advantages which our grannies never had. I think that what we know is that even our grandmother's generation were very aware of the world around them and very active participants in the world around them. And if we're talking about the famous march which took place, I think that what we can see is that despite whatever challenges those women faced, they understood that the pass laws were a fundamental issue that was going to make their living circumstances and the circumstances of their families and their children even worse. And so whether they hitched a ride, whether they walked, whether they brought their children with them, there are wonderful stories about that march, about women bringing their families. There's even a story about a madam going with her domestic worker on this march. And I think that what it represents is this understanding that South African women have had, that there is a bigger picture to their own lives, and that they need to be actively involved in that bigger picture. If we go back to last year, when there were mass demonstrations by women across our country against gender-based violence, I think that you can see that women are still playing that very important role in our society, taking a stand against those social issues that really matter, and in many ways taking a lead in society in relation to those issues.
So Melissa, I'll pick up on that, a little bit about the role of women in leadership and politics. So there's been a lot of conversation in South Africa in recent years about when will South Africa be ready for a female leader. Do you think a country needs to be ready for female leadership? And do you think that we as a nation are moving in that direction?
I think that South Africa does extremely well if you look at international comparisons with the involvement of women in political office, in public service office, in the non-governmental sector, in leadership roles. Perhaps where we don't do so well is in the business sector, where there still aren't a lot of women in the boardrooms and in executive office. But in my own travels in the world, I've been quite interested to find that even if you look at countries like the Scandinavian countries that are considered to be very socially advanced, in fact, we have more women in parliament, we have more women in executive office. So perhaps there is a general acceptance that women can play roles in government. And obviously what that means is that the day when a woman is elected to be a president will not come as a shock, I think, to our country. We've already seen women premiers, we've got women mayors. So I guess it's not going to be a shock to our country when a woman becomes a president.
Thank you, Minister. I mean, it's great to hear that we as women, we're actually taking a stand. So a very interesting one. Tell us a little about your typical day as a minister and how you juggle your priorities.
Oh, that I was thinking that's a very interesting question, because there's before COVID and after COVID. So during COVID, we all know that the way we juggle our priorities is we spend very, very long hours on Zoom. And I think that one of the issues that many of us are experiencing is that these can be very productive times, but it's also a situation where days have no beginning and no end. There's no respect for Saturdays and Sundays. So I suppose in some ways political life is like that, because during the week you would go to Parliament, you would go to your department, but on weekends you would be doing party political work. So this choice of career is not a choice that has a lot of free time. It's suitable for workaholics who don't enjoy having their own time and their own space. And obviously, that's not necessarily healthy. And it's a stressful existence. Pre-COVID, it was also an experience where one traveled up and down to Cape Town every week. Because you're a national minister, you also have to fly to different provinces. So it was an experience of spending an enormous amount of time in airplanes. So it's I think that people often think this is a glamorous job. It's not a glamorous job. It's a tough job with very long hours, a lot of traveling, a lot of stress, and a lot of competing demands.
So, Minister, leading on from that, I'm going to pose maybe two questions quickly to you. Is on a personal note, I mean, how do you then regain your energy? I can imagine those hours must be very draining. What do you personally do to kind of keep yourself inspired and also physically and mentally energized? And then also, you know, you touched on what might draw people to this career. So yourself, you were obviously drawn to politics. Maybe you can give us a bit of an insight into what drew you into this career to start with. And if you knew then what you knew now, would you do it all again?
Well, I suppose maybe just to start with my own background, I grew up in quite a politically conscious family. My parents were very politically aware people, and I was brought up to believe that apartheid was wrong. I was brought up to believe that democracy was right. And I think from a very early age, when I asked questions, why are people being rounded up in the street and being put into the back of vans? My parents were very candid that these are pass raids, it's wrong, people are being treated in an unjust manner. It's simply because they are Black that they are being treated like this. So I grew up in this very politically conscious family, and we could never get through a family meal without all the reference books and the encyclopedia, and you know, that was before Google, all over the dining room table. That was the kind of family that I grew up in. And 1976 was my first year at university, and I had already joined NUSAS, and on the 16th of June there was a decision to support students who had been killed by police in Soweto and to march from Wits University to Soweto. Well, as everybody knows, we didn't get further than the first set of robots before we were tear gassed and chased back onto campus. And I guess, as they say, the rest is history. But I think that growing up in that kind of family, I was drawn to politics firstly, and later on, as we moved out of the 1980s into the democratic dispensation in the 1990s, I was approached by the African National Congress to stand as a member of parliament in Gauteng, in the Gauteng provincial legislature, and I had no idea what that would mean, but I agreed to do that. And I think that through that experience, I came to understand what it means to be an elected public representative, but also in due course through my appointment to being a member of the Executive Council in the Gauteng government, to understanding the issues of public service. And, you know, I was saying earlier that many people are attracted to politics, and they they think that it would be very nice to be a minister because they see you have drivers and bodyguards and everybody stands up when you come into the room. But I think that sometimes what is missed, and I think this is a very, very pertinent and important issue that one wants to raise at this point in time, is what are the values that underlie a choice in public service, and what are the values that underlie your decision when you take that oath of office. And I think it's really important, particularly because we're living in a time of scandals around procurement in relation to protective equipment in the COVID pandemic, and also some of the history of our country over the last 10 years. I think it's very important to assert those values of public service. And really, I think that choosing to be a public representative is about saying that you are going to give your life to the service of others. You're not there so that others must service you or flatter you or whatever. And I suppose that when you take that choice, it's very important that you think very carefully about it, because it does mean that you voluntarily give up a whole range of rights and choices that other people might have. You have to think about the way you conduct yourself. You have to think about the choices that you make. And it's a difficult decision. And it's a difficult career path to follow if you believe in those values and you want to live them. I wouldn't want to pretend that I'm some sort of saint. I'm not. I get very irritated. I get stressed. I get angry. And what it means is one has to then constantly go back and say, all right, you made this choice. What does it mean? You decided to play this role. What does it mean? So I suppose it's, I just feel it's important at this point in time to assert the fact that those of us who are in government are there to serve the taxpayer, who at the end of the day pays our salaries and who votes us into office. So we are there at the bidding of the taxpayer, at the bidding of our citizens. It's not a right, it's not an entitlement. And essentially what it means is that you have to provide that service to the public.
Thanks, Minister. And Ndzalama, did you have another question?
No, not from my side, but then to the Minister is there anything else that you would like to share with us as women and then young women out there who would like to be in politics like in the future?
I've spoken about some of the complexities and some of the difficulties of making these kinds of choices. Let me talk about the rewards. I've always believed that if you give, you get back so much in return. And I've always believed that you can't just take from this world. You have to give back to the world. And when you do that, you find a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose, which makes life very rewarding. You asked me earlier, Yolan, what sort of gives me energy and what keeps me going? And I would say to you that part of my work that I really love is that aspect that involves going out and doing constituency work and working with communities. And I think that when one does that kind of work, one really comes into contact with ordinary people who have extremely difficult lives, but who have the most incredible fortitude in the way in which they approach these difficulties. They have the most interesting and innovative way of dealing with the difficulties that they face. And I always find that a very inspiring experience and a very humbling experience. On Mandela Day, I went to the Overberg in the Western Cape, where my parliamentary constituency is, and we did a consultation with some of the small-scale fishermen that are living in that area. And it was really an interaction where they were speaking about their difficulties, and we were speaking about how, as a department, we are trying to assist the small-scale fishing industry. And it's just a very rewarding and wonderful experience to meet people who are so willing to share with you their life stories and their solutions to the problems that they face. And this is something that I always find very inspiring, and it's something that reminds me, why did I make these choices? And it really goes to the root of what I suppose motivates me, which is a very deep-seated belief that as human beings, we're all born equal. We should all have equal life chances, and that we need to work to make that dream a reality in the long term.
Minister, thank you. We're running out of time, but I feel that we need to ask you one question specific to the environment, seeing as that we're all passionate about the environment, and that's really what's brought us all together. Before I ask my question, I just want to say, next time you're in the Overberg, please let us know. It would be our great honor to take you to see one of the last and greatest strongholds of the blue crane, which of course is in the Overberg, and we can guarantee you some spectacular sightings of our national bird next time you're down there. But my last question for you is really an environmental question. I think everyone is well versed in most of the challenges faced by environment today, but what are the ones that perhaps keep you awake the most at night? What is the sort of the overarching environmental issue facing South Africa that is the one that perhaps keeps you awake the most at night, and the one that you perhaps in your term as our environmental minister feel that you would like to make the most advance on, and is closest to your heart?
Well, I think the one that worries me the most is climate change. I don't want to pretend that I'm going to make any monumental difference, because obviously it's a very complex issue, and it's an issue that goes right to the heart of a lot of our economic and social problems in this country. But I think that it's really the fundamental issue that threatens the future of humanity. And because of that, it's an issue that I think all of us need to be concerned about. It's not just an environmental sector issue. And all of us need to be concerned about how are we going to put our own country, and indeed the world, onto a more sustainable economic trajectory. We all understand that climate change is exacerbating environmental degradation and the loss of biodiversity. And the current COVID-19 pandemic is a very interesting pandemic, because although it's the very immediate issue that all of us are dealing with, it's linked into these longer term questions of the conflict between human beings and the environment. We know that this disease originates from a different species, and that it has crossed over from that species to human beings. And we know that zoonotic diseases affect human beings when human beings are in conditions where they are very close to issues of environmental degradation. So I think that in a way, this particular pandemic is a very important wake-up call for all of us, because what we're seeing is how a very little virus can actually destroy whole societies and whole economies. And as we build back from this pandemic, it's a very important opportunity for us to start asking the question, how do we put our societies and our economies on a much more sustainable development trajectory? You know, Ndzalama, you raised the issue of what are we saying to younger people? And I suppose one of the things we would want to say to younger people who have environmental concerns is that this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. Working for a just transition, working to put our country and our planet on a more sustainable trajectory, it's a long-term battle. And little things matter. Taking steps now matter. But what we've also got to be prepared for is the long-term battle. My generation has had the privilege of bringing freedom and democracy to this country. And certainly when I was 18 years old and I marched on Jan Smuts Avenue, I didn't ever think that we would see the end of apartheid. I was just doing it because at that point in time, I believed it was the right thing to do. And to young people who are involved in battles around climate change, what I would want to say to them is, be aware that it's a long-term battle. Do what you can do now, and don't give up. Because all of our futures depend on your abilities and your energies.
Thank you, Minister. We are out of time, so before I hand over to Ndzalama to do the last thank yous and the closing, I just want to say thank you from my side for the level of engagement that I think I can speak on behalf of the broader environmental NGO community has enjoyed with you since you've been in your position, and the frank ability that we have to be able to communicate with you around all these issues. As I think you've said, environmental issues are around environment or business, non-government organizations, government entities. We all have to work together. And just your willingness to come on this conversation with us this morning has been very inspirational. And I think it's just a part of the wonderful engagement that we have with your department. So thank you from my side for that. And Ndzalama, I'm going to let you do the final thank you and closing.
Thank you very much, Yolan. And thank you to you, Minister. I mean, very wise words from you there that we as young women can actually learn from you, and the fact that we as young women do have opportunities. So it's up to us to use this time and then grab this opportunity and then use it. So from my side, thank you so much, Minister Creecy, for doing this interview with us. It was such an honor to be interviewing the Minister of Environment and Forestry and Fisheries. I mean, with my CEO on my side, you never get this opportunity to do this like in a daily basis. But it is such an inspiration, not only to me, but to young women out there who will be watching this interview. I mean, with so much happening in the country today, I mean, with the gender-based violence going on, it's just a lot. I mean, there is a major issue that's actually surrounding in South Africa at the moment. But then we should also look at the positive things that we as women are achieving and then doing. And then, I mean, with you and Minister Creecy and Yolan being not perfect, but then good examples, and then showing good leadership to us as young women, we can actually learn a lot from that. So, I mean, we can only do so much together, and then with support from one another, and then just to be fearless is the only way that we can achieve our goals. So thank you very much.